And so it is a sacred space because I think it allows us to connect with somebody so different from us, so authentically, that you sometimes become paired for life. We recently had a situation with an older white man and an older black man, who for reasons of my own, I will not name who they are. And because I think the table is a sacred space, and it's not so important that what their names were or their transactional roles in the world, but they both have this experience. One of them is very conservative. One of them would consider himself very liberal. And they come from very different backgrounds. And during a conversation, it came to the attention of this black man that the white man had the question was, what is someone or something that influenced your own decision to access higher education? And this white man, who's reached to prominence in his community, said, my family said, you're going to go to college. No, you're not. You're on the farm, and you're going to have a farm. You're going to be a farmer, and you don't need to go to college. And this black man said, I never, ever, until the moment that man spoke, I had never thought, he said, I don't know how I got to almost 60 and never thought of this. It never dawned on me that there was any barrier to doing anything you wanted to do as a white person in America. It never dawned on me until that moment. Often people assume that white people need to do something in their behavior. And by the way, I'm not saying white people do not need to do something about their behavior relative to race. Do not misinterpret. I'm kind of militant about some of these ideas, and I just want to put that on the record that but if what you're really trying to do is not cast blame or aspersions, and you really are trying to get to the fundamental thing that ties us and have a really decent conversation about education, having that black man in that moment understand where that other person came from and look at him in a new way, so developed and helped that conversation in a way that it would never, it went beyond the superficial. It went to the deeply personal, and that's sacred space. I think the deeply personal is sacred space. And because of that you go to that place, and it fundamentally changes both actors. And I do know that after this table, these two men who came from very different backgrounds have found a way to see each other multiple times and have become very dear friends from that one sharing of the table. And they now are talking about doing things together and ways in which they can collaborate. But in fact, many of us are very stuck in our own ideology, and for these two people to be able together, they now have some trust and reciprocity between one another. So now what can they do? Well, now they have the ability to know something so special about one another that when they sit down to work, they see enough of themselves in the other person, because apples do not fall far from trees. And so now they have the apple tree relationship, in terms of if birds of a feather flock together, and apples don't fall far from trees, and peas live in a pod, we've made them peas in a pod, even though they weren't before that one meal together. And so I think it is sacred space. I think there is a communion that happens. And really, in the meaning of community, a communion happens, where we are allowed to become communal with one another. And the conception of community doesn't get become politicized into this conversation about communism, or that it's flaky in some way, but it kind of reasserts the notion that before we can do something together, we have to stand in relationship to one another. And relationship to one another means we have to, in some way, see ourselves, because that's who we as people, all of us are, white, black, brown, green. I don't know any green people, but it's possible. I don't know. That we actually extend ourselves in a way, and we have to be safe to do that. And the table provides that, is the sacred space.